Welcome to the Spirit Sessions podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us where I'll help you find your true spiritual home, where every single aspect of you is holy ground, holy ground, holy ground, holy ground.
This is Spirit Session Podcast with Katie Silcox. Venga chicos, empezamos.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hi everyone, Katie here. This podcast is intended to inspire you, educate you, and most importantly, support you on your journey towards knowing who you really are, that inner self, that inner teacher. I am not a psychologist or a medical doctor and do not offer professional health or medical advice on this podcast. If you are suffering from any kind of psychological or medical issue, please do the right thing and seek help from your qualified health professional. Hey there, beautiful podcast listener. I want to thank the lovely and amazing Eden Garcia Thaler, who has generously given us this audio recording of our conversation on her podcast. Eden is a former Shakti Ayurveda School graduate, and now she is doing her own podcast. She's a shadow alchemist helping highly sensitive beings liberate their true selves, connect to their personal version of the divine, and manifest their desires by integrating their shadows and blocks. She's also the host of this podcast that you're going to hear, Field Notes from the Spiritual Journey. What a great name. A podcast where she explores topics like how to do shadow work, the anatomy of feedback loops, and she shares her personal manifestation stories, interviewing experts in personal development and spirituality. So check out her podcast, and we will put a link to that and her website in the show notes. This episode was really beautiful. Eden was an amazing interviewer, and it's so fun to be the person on the other end of the interviewing. And we talked all things deep down and goddess. So I think you'll definitely enjoy this. Also, as you know, there are only a few more weeks. I think when we air this podcast, there are only 2.5 more weeks left to sign up for our only thing really that we do all year, which is a year-long deep dive into Ayurveda, spirituality, Tantra, holistic medicine, with the most amazing teachers from both Eastern and Western traditions. We hope you will be a part of this journey with us. And with that, enjoy this show.
Well, welcome, Katie. How are you?
I'm really good, Eden. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thanks for coming and honoring us all. I've literally mentioned your work on the podcast to everyone I talk to. So this is so awesome that you're here, getting to hear it straight from your mouth. So I wanted to start off taking a trip back in time. I was rereading some of Happy, Healthy, Sexy, which is your book, which I highly recommend everyone go and get. And you talk about this past life, living in southern Spain, working in tech, smoking cigarettes. And I'm like, what was that, Katie? Because when I met you, I'm like, this woman is a goddess that walked straight out of the ocean to us. So can you just tell us paint a little picture, what was that past life like? Or were you just always like this?
Well, it's just such an interesting entry portal into the conversation, isn't it? Because, your perception of me says a lot about you and your capacity to see the beauty and the essence of me. That you would see me as something that walks straight out of the ocean, brings tears to my eyes, because my whole life journey has been about and is about learning how to rest in the arms of the mama, of love, of wateriness, of ease, of
the collective unconscious of God, whatever you want to call this big oceanic force that is literally our Earth Mother is the ocean. And so yes, I will take on that notion of emerging out of the sea like Venus, but you know, the stuff you read about in my book about smoking cigarettes and being a wild child in the south of Spain and owning a bar, and I was a consult I worked for an AI firm. I mean, that's also real and still alive in me. And you know, to be super honest, a lot of the things that I struggled with back then, like they're gone. Like I don't drink, I don't drink at all. I don't smoke anything. I don't do any sort of drugs. I'm sensually celibate for the past 2 years, and really in a moment of just like letting a lot of my addictions on a subtle level go. And yet I very much identify with the word being with the words being in recovery, and being identified at least partially a part of my being with being addicted. And I have a friend who runs an addiction recovery center in New York, and he said to me a couple of days ago, "You're either in recovery or you're in denial." And so that young woman that was a little off kilter lives with me every day of my life. And yet I'm a completely, as you noticed, totally different person from that young woman. Thank God I had great teachers, and I have an amazing therapist. Like, read a lot of books, and I'll give myself some credit too. Like I'm fiery as hell, and I want to know who I am, and I really, really am on fire for God. And there's a shadow to that as well, but I think, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's just what came out of my mouth.
I love that. No, thank you for sharing that. And now that you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's still in you. Like that just fiery, I mean, Shakti kind of, it's one of the faces of the goddess. But yeah, and I think we all have that off kilter. I love that phrase, that off kilter young woman. I think we all have that in us. And yeah, it's not about extinguishing her or killing her off or totally even getting rid of some of our patterns, but learning how to love ourselves through them more and more and more.
Yeah. And what you're saying reminds me, like the way you highlighted the words off kilter. There's a goddess, I can't remember her name in Hindi, but like it's really long. It's like a really long Sanskrit name, but it's translated as the goddess, she who is never not totally broken.
Mm-hmm.
And my mentor that I have now has really helped me see that and you'll hear me say this and be like, but Katie, I've heard this come out of your mouth. And it's very different to like the layers of our spiritual development, the way we keep repeating the same things to ourselves, and we hook up with good coaches or mentors that can just repeat it back to us. Like we're relearning these things over and over and over and over. It's like, that's what a mala bead is. It's just like, please come, God, please come, just again and again, because my perception is so different than this. And one of the things that really struck me a few months ago was this notion that the goddesses that we love to learn about, whether it be in the Indian or the Greek or the Roman or any of our Celtic traditions, African traditions, they are us. They are at least in some sense, they are our anatomy, and they are the anatomy of our psyche, which is a word for soul. And so if we think about our emotions as goddesses, then the idea of killing off or getting rid of a goddess is not a good plan, right? First of all, she will always win. She's a freaking goddess. Like you can't kill her, And what you can do is hide her away, and she'll show up in sort of other chambers of our existence. And that's where you get kind of rough stuff. And so what I'm attempting to do is to the best of my ability, just really acknowledge how hard this is. And at the same time, love and honor these different emotions as goddesses.
Beautifully said. Can you briefly touch on, because I think some of my listeners at least will be new to this, but what, I know this is such a broad question, what is the goddess? Like the goddess, capital G, broadly speaking.
Yeah.
And then you touch on these goddesses as the anatomy of our psyche, as almost archetypes, maybe would be another word. Can you explain that dichotomy of like, okay, we have the goddess, the divine feminine, and then we have goddesses and how we can relate to them a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Just that small question. You know, Eden, I've known listeners out there, I've known Eden for many years. And you have always been so precocious in your questions, and I love it because it makes me really think. And I enjoy sharing. I've always enjoyed sharing time and conversation with you because you ask the big stuff that I ask, and in fact, remind me of me and etc. But you know, that's why I started, and it's not a plug for my school. I was like, we have to start a whole 2-year program to just even begin to have the room to have these deep conversations. But the quick and dirty on it, to the best of my ability, is like holding the humility before defining. Here's what I want to say. Like entering into the definition with the understanding that we can't define it. And in a way that's important. Like we shouldn't have the hubris to think that we can. But it's like, I know it when I see it. I know it when I feel it. And, you know, you're shaking your head. And it's like listeners out there will know, like in Jungian psychology, which I'm now geeking out hard on, like they call it this contact with the numinous. This word means a sense that something transpersonal, bigger than you, has shown up. And it's so shocking because it feels totally other than you, and yet completely personal. And so the goddess is another word for the collective unconscious. It's another word for nature. It's another word for what we call the divine feminine that's in women and men. And women tended to be unique carriers of this force. And of course, right now it's like, that's like a hot button topic. Like, but let's just say men and women carry it. And it's this, on one level, deep connection to the reality of the primal energy that lives in us as anger, as fear, as sadness. It is what thousands and thousands of years of our ancestors have experienced and learned, both the pleasurable and painful aspects of existence that have come from a direct relationship with nature. When you live out in the wild, you create the god of thunder and lightning. You create astrological mythology because you are in contact with it. And that relation to the natural world and the ensuing visceral emotion, and of course, physiological evolutionary effect on our body, that's been handed down to us for thousands and thousands of years. And so in a way, when we say the goddess, and you said it best, Eden, we're talking about an archetype or a pattern of our ancestry. That when I feel fear because I see something I don't like on the news or on Instagram, or I feel angry at something, I'm not only feeling that as a personal phenomenon, but it's connecting to an ancestry of my personal lineage, but also the ancestry of all of us. And so I think that primal aspect of the goddess, we can see it has thousands of faces, and all of it's the divine mother, but one of them is really beloved. And right, like our culture loves it too, a few of them, right? So for example, let's take it out of the abstract. Our culture really loves the nurturing, loving mama, right? Of course it does. It's a really great thing. I love it. So do you, right? It's like, you can see I've got my Christmas lights on and I'm all higged out over here and like cooking food for myself. And like, and there's like a little note card on my desk that really reminds me of her, and it just says warmth. And it's this quality of consciousness that holds, it's warm, it's loving. It's the way I feel towards my niece and nephew. It's the way I feel towards my students. It's this easy thing for me, right? And that's this loving mother. Well, there's another face of the goddess that our culture really likes, and that's Aphrodite or Lakshmi, right? It's like the Marilyn Monroe, like bring it on, big boy. Like, this sort of sex bomb, coquettish, sexy bunny. And I know how to do that one really well too, right? And so those are two faces. And we learn which faces from our family, from our society, from our whatever, our unique circumstance or cultural circumstance. We especially as women are really trained unconsciously which of these goddesses is acceptable, which is going to get you money, validation, safety, all of these things. But she has lots of faces. And one of them is age, the crone. One of them is angry. You mentioned Durga before, and I think Durga gets oversimplified because she's really actually infinite love. But these fiercer qualities of our primal reality are often dampened. And so if we are to be in full contact with a goddess, capital G, it means being awake to all the ways that she shows up in us. And I want to make something really clear about that I think doesn't get quite, Instagram or TikTok spirituality and psychology is really actually quite dangerous. Like these things are complex, and it's easy to oversimplify them. And I've been guilty of that as well. But one of the important aspects when working with goddess capital G is this is very much an inside journey to what Jung calls the self. He got that word from the Vedas, so yay, cool. Western, Eastern, like love each other in that way. But it's an internal journey. And so what I worry sometimes is you'll see these things like, oh, well, I'm in contact with Durga, and so I can just sort of rail on other people because this is my fierce anger. And it's not really it at all. It's that's actually, you actually don't, if you're doing that, you're actually projecting her outside of you. You're actually denying her. And so real goddess work is super painful, Eden. It's like, oh my God, this person is annoying me, and it is my anger, and it is my frustration, or this person hurt me, and this is my sadness. And of course, there are moments where there are real victims and real predators, but it's like 1% of the time. And then you need to get the fuck out. But like, usually it's just like projection meeting projection. And so goddess work is taking back the ways that we have put ourselves out there, whether it be, oh my God, I love you, you're an angel, you hung the moon, I want to be like you. That would be a projection. Or, OMG, you suck and I hate you, right? Like we do it on both sides. And in both ways, we're actually in a fundamental abandonment of the goddesses inside. And so my work the past very, 2-3 years especially has been about reclaiming my projections. This is goddess work par excellence. And when we do that, she is able to do whatever she wants, right? But one of the words we can use of what tends to happen is she becomes conscious in you. And so when I feel angry, I don't have to blow it out on you or myself, right? Like I can sit with it as a pure primal archetype. I can draw it. I can feel it come through me in dreams. I can meditate with it. I can watch the way it unravels and dissolves in me into something else. I can own it. I know I didn't differentiate between goddess capital G and little g, but really it's all there. Goddess capital G is the divine mother, this idea of the feminine, which we haven't even really gotten into. And then the little g, if we wanted to make them little g's, are just all these individual ways it expresses through us as energy.
Beautiful. Thank you. That was so good. And I think it's a good segue into this season of winter, which we're in, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. And how does the goddess present herself, or which phases of the goddess are presenting in the winter? You spoke of this goddess work as deeply painful, and it really is, because this is something I deeply work with within myself, of just letting our emotions move through and letting like that ego death die off when you realize your projections are not real. Like, they are real for you, they're a real experience, but that this entanglement that we get lost in when we don't bring that consciousness to them, it's hard and painful to extract ourselves from that and to let the old patterns die off. And winter, in my understanding, can be a really good time for that. Can you speak to like the seasonality of this time?
Yeah, thank you. I feel like I planted you in the audience and you're asking all the right questions, because that's, I mean, well, there are two things that come to mind. Yes, this can be like, for everyone out there listening, winter has in its own essence two qualities. It has, and that's why we're like, what do all these rituals mean, right? It has oppositional qualities. On one hand, it's death. And on the other hand, it's eros, life. And these two things coexist. How? Naturally, we can see all of the death that's happened outside. But then we have all of these centuries, millennia, these ancient rituals from every culture, especially those of us who are from colder climates right now, of light, of warmth, of family gatherings, of gifts, of bringing in the greenery, putting the greenery everywhere, the wreaths, the mistletoe is a lot of these are in it, and we don't have to worry about, well, what is from what? It is a massive cultural evolutionary mix. But a lot of these rituals that we experience in, quote, Christmas time are pagan. And they were all about, mistletoe was a pagan ritual about sex. And then we still see that old vestige of that where we kiss under the mistletoe. It's this erotic reminder. Outside is death, but inside is eros. It's Shakti, it's life, it's birth. If you do not do death work, especially when you can do it anytime because life is life, and sometimes life makes you do it, but winter is the time for that. And the irony, as you know, Eden, is that as I move into death more fully, it enables me to experience life. Emptiness leads to fullness. And so this can be this really potent time for and then the second part of what I was going to say is, it can feel, in my personal experience, initially like eating a shit sandwich, right? Because there's a reason that we move off of being nailed to our own current moment experience. You know, in the Christian tradition, we call this Jesus on the cross. He's nailed to the cross.
Wow.
Dr. Ladd says, one of my mentors in Ayurveda, enjoy your crucifixion. Enjoy your resurrection. Without enjoying the crucifixion, and by enjoy, he doesn't mean some sick sadomasochistic pleasure. He means on the other side of the pain is bliss. So winter is that time where really doing less, we all hear about it and read about it, but it isn't about not filling up your calendar, although that can really, really help. It's not engaging as much the spirit of drama.
Oh, that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Which I'm sure neither you nor I, who are like one step off Broadway, right? Like know nothing about, but there's a way that in summer, the sun is in the sky, there's amplification. Winter is about the opposite of amplification. And not to go too deeply into it, but this is important because this is lost knowledge. This whole thing about Christianity and the rising and the sun, like the Son of God, Christ, this is, again, wonderful if you're a Christian. Me too. I'm down with Jesus hardcore. I was raised Southern Baptist. Like, I get down with Christ, but the original root stories are deeply human. In every culture, we talk about this season of the year where to our ancestors, it literally looks like the sun is dying, and they had a different consciousness than us. And we had to mythologically be reminded as an oral tradition. This is like pre-printing press. We had to be reminded that the sun has only gone and died temporarily, and that he will resurrect. And so this is a visceral remembering that the physical sun is going, the days are getting shorter and shorter, and the psyche's capacity to connect to that light, if we don't have that reminder, has the capacity to be dimmed. And indeed, this is the time in this country, we're in the US, I'm sure it's similar in other areas, where we get the most seasonal affective disorder, anxiety, depression. All of that is that lack of light. And it's not, and the sun will help, but it's spiritual light. And so our internal practices and our external candlelit rituals become ever more important at this time. And I know I'm on a tangent, but there's one more thing that I think will be beneficial to the listener. If our holidays, if we do not, and of course, religion, I welcome all of them, right? This isn't about your religion. If during these family gatherings of our holidays, we don't reinitiate the ritual, we often can feel vapid and empty. And we reach for the alcohol, and of course we reach because we're with our nuclear family and it's triggering all our stuff. But like on a deeper level, there's a part of us that knows that we've lost these traditions and the sap and juice of their meaning. And so what I just encourage everyone to do is really, you don't have to go take a course about ritual. Like, this, like, we did a ritual at my house over Thanksgiving with my family, and I'm thinking, oh God, my family thinks I'm just such a big old weirdo. And I'm going to gingerly introduce this ritual to my family members. And so we're at Thanksgiving, and I just pull out a card for everybody, and I just say, just write down what you're thankful for, what you're willing to let go of, and what you're calling in for 2023. And I want you, and at first everyone, is kind of like, whoa, what's this? And like everybody's joking around and like, okay, cool, that's fine. But they're doing it. Even my nephew Jack, who's 6, and he just learned to write, right? And he's like, I let go of turkey because I don't like it. And it's just, right? So fun, right? But like, here's the crazy part of this ritual. Then we read our statements to the family, right? And we get around to my dad, who's like Fox News watching, good old football player, star from the 1970s, Deep South Tennessee boy, who I love, right? But like, my dad's not sitting around doing like goddess rituals, okay, guys? He didn't, this is all new for at least a big part of my family. And I think my own expectation was, my dad, I don't know if he's going to do this, right? And that's my perception. We get to my dad. He pulls out the note card. Now, mind you, my father almost died of a heart attack during COVID. We almost lost him. And that's another story. But he opens up the card, Eden, and he says, I want to let go of limiting mindsets. And I just felt, like you're feeling too, like the arrow of the goddess shoot me through the heart. Like, my perception was so wrong. I'm seeing my father through the lens of the past. And my dad actually said one of the more eloquent things if we were going to be judging, right? And it touched all of us. Like, here's this guy that we've put in a box, Trump voting, blah, blah, blah. You know what we do? We do it, us, you know, more awake people. It's total bullshit. My dad really showed us in that ritual who he was. So that's one example of just like a simple little thing. And then we put the papers in a jar. And I said, this jar will come back to us at Christmas, where we will burn these we will burn these cards in the Yule log, which is an ancient Nordic tradition. And they were like, yeah. Now, Eden, what this is doing is creating a cord of sacred connection bigger than all of the nuclear family, not only around that moment together, but around the future moment that we can expect to have with one another. It's a ritual cord. And now that cord from Christmas will take on its next iteration. And so my point with all this is just make some shit up, right? It doesn't matter. Research something or go read something. But we, in this time of the modern human, for many of us, not everyone, some people are deeply connected to their rituals and they work for them. But for many modern humans, religion isn't working. And then what do? We go to the East. Let's study yoga and Buddhism because we don't like our religion. And then we study that and we go, okay, but something's missing. I don't know. Right? Well, yeah, it's not at all from your tradition. And like, you're welcome to study it. And I, did it for 22 years. But the deeper connection comes through your own regular ass life. So that's my take on winter possibilities.
Amen. Oh my gosh. That was a sermon right there.
Girl, I preach.
I know. You have that preacher archetype and I love it. I have it too.
Yes.
And the goddess archetype. But yeah, wow. I love that because something you said to me like so long ago, or you just said one time was like, everyone is spiritual. I think it was in Ayurveda school and someone was asking like, what if you get like a non, spiritual person or something like that? And you're just like, every human is spiritual. Like we have this in our bones. It might not look the same way. They might not be doing yoga in yoga leggings every day, but like people are spiritual. And I think it's so beautiful, this idea that we don't have to go get a course on rituals, which is so crazy you said that because literally 2 weeks ago, I was like freaking out to my work and I was like, we don't have any family rituals. Like, what are we going to do? We need to create rituals. And I was like asking people for recommendations on like books about rituals. And it's like, we know. And that's also the feminine is like, go out of your house, like collect some leaves, like light some candles. It's these simple things. And I think that's so beautiful and everyone can connect with it. I also made this connection when you were speaking. I'm curious your thoughts on it, that, you talked at the beginning about how when we don't honor like all these goddess archetypes, we honor like a couple of them in our society. And when we don't honor them within or without, they will take on these unconscious forms. They will literally weed themselves into other areas in our lives. And I was thinking about this season and this spiritual, it's not only the physical light, but the spiritual light getting dimmer, and this seasonal, we call it seasonal affective disorder, anxiety, depression. Like, do you feel like that also has to do with this inability to honor death, like to be connected to those death rituals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well said. I think I still have anxiety every now and then, but I've struggled hard with that beast. And the more that I have been willing to look at the parts of myself that I found intolerable, the more the anxiety goes away. There's this super limited sense of who we are and a deep fear in all of us of being bad and maybe even evil. And we can talk about where we got that, but one of the most healing things I've ever experienced is, and it doesn't mean you go and do bad things. This is all a very subtle journey, but being okay with the ways in which and this won't surprise you, but like have a huge ego, and huge ego does not mean, oh, I think the world of myself, right? A big ego just means this like very sort of solidified sense of who we are. And not to make comparisons, but I'm comparing myself to myself, where I am now versus where I was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. And a part of my ego structure was the sense of being super identified with being kind, good, fair, and a victim. Yeah. And a few more, right? That like those, and some of them really bad, but I was okay with them, right? I was okay with being like the abused one and the shit on one. And like, I was okay being the scared little bunny. That I didn't like it, but like, I was okay with being that. And I was okay with being the like bright shining star that knows how to talk good and fill up a room. And, neither of those things aren't true, but they're not the whole truth.
Mm.
And so a deep part of goddess work is the willingness to actually be with the parts of yourself that you find impossible and intolerable. And guess what? This is the cool thing. We all have it. All of us have an inner Donald Trump. We all have an inner Marilyn Monroe. We all have an inner devil. We all have an inner Jesus Christ. We all have all of these, what you called, and it's correct, these archetypes. And when we can be with them and recognize them, we can not control them, but we can make sure that they do not control us unconsciously. Jung said it really well. He actually wrote this over the door of his house, Eden. He said, wow, be sure, and I may not be getting the quote perfect, but it's in Latin, I think, or Greek, and it's invited or uninvited, be sure the gods will be present. So, in other words, don't be so, I had a student the other day who was just like, and it's not to throw off on her, we all do this, but she's like, I was just so upset and so angry, and like, I'm not that person. Like, I'm like a really compassionate person. And you know me, I just don't have a lot of filter. And I was like, wait, pause. But are you? And like, it can feel like this assault. Like, well, how dare you say I'm not a compassionate person? You are. But we all have a lot going on that isn't always. And by actually letting those gods be present. Oh, I want to tell you one more thing, because I think you're going to love this. Jung also, when we don't deal with, he called these the archetypes, but also, a personalized version of the archetype is called a complex, especially when it's unconscious, right? And so he said, when we don't make these complexes conscious, they show up in 3 ways. One, well, they are going to show up in 3 ways. 1, symptom. 2, projection. 3, symbol, image. So what that means is all the stuff you haven't felt, known, owned, loved on, seen, elicited for through dreams, sex, meditation, plant medicine, whatever you do, right? Like, if you haven't called these things to the foreground, and my advice is don't call them through drugs. They'll show up in your life. Yeah. But when they're there, when we're with them, we can enable them to speak to us symbolically. They will often, you and I have done a lot of work with the emotional body. The emotional body is an image maker. Like, it feels like I'm being stabbed in the heart. There's a pressure on my chest. There's barbed wire around my belly. Like, all of these words we use to describe the medicine that lies inside the poison of the image. So either we work with it symbolically, dream work, emotion work, all of those ways that I mentioned, or it's going to show up as a symptom, or it's going to show up as a projection out onto people you don't like. And then you will keep attracting those people into your life over and over and over again. And there's this hilarious phrase about that. And that is, if you go outside and you meet an asshole, you met an asshole. They exist. It's true. But if you go outside and everyone you meet is an asshole, you're the asshole. Like,
Wow. That's a good one.
that's a really good one. So I'm just trying to really see that inside myself more and support other people to be able to really see that in a way that's also super compassionate, because we all do this all the time. And the more we can just take the stigma off of all of it, while at the same time taking radical responsibility for it, that's when you start to see this incredible amount of healing happen.
So good. So good. Oh my gosh. I just got this mental image when you were talking of like just seeing, we live in such a time of just like mob culture, group cancellation. And like, I just got this image of it's like seeing this whole group as your enemy that just represents this
100%.
archetype you just refuse to look at within yourself. And it's
100%.
it totally perpetuates it too, because it's like as soon as you're committed to being the victim, you are like simultaneously ensuring that there's a perpetrator out there, but also like you're going to be a perpetrator at some point. You know, it's like it's this constant what you can't escape it till you get off the train. Or like you're saying, you know, yeah, my inner victim is really present right now. My inner perpetrator is really rearing right now. I want to go perpetrate some anger, like, and just making friends with them and being like, yeah, we all have these. No one gets a clean, no one is this, yeah, like you're saying, this Christ angel figure. We all have both, all of it.
All of it. And maybe we actually are the Christ in the sense of that word, meaning the way Jung describes it as the whole man, the whole woman, whole, holy. You know,
That's
maybe
so good.
we are at the end of the day. You know, this I just think, you know, I know you're passionate about this enlightenment path, and so am I. And maybe the more we're on it, the more we realize, like, Bruce Tift is an incredible, like, this book Already Free, we've been using a lot in spirit sessions and Shakti school. And he says, you know, the developmental side of life is like we do have to go back and work with our childhood trauma and get a therapist and get good mentors and coaches, because it's real. Like, we do need to do that individual personal childhood reprocessing work, some of us more than others. But there's also this fruitional path that is like, you're already free. And to tap into that consciousness requires that we get out of fundamental aggression. And that's what you pointed to with this mob mentality. This cancel culture is a great projection. If it is a refusal to see that the ones that we're canceling are ourselves. And in this fruitional approach to the development, we realize that the ones that we've been at war with all along was ourself. And this can be insidious, Eden. So like, I'm really working the subtle level of this, right? And the not subtle level. Like, I still see my ex-boyfriend. I'm like, ugh, I don't like you. You're the devil. Right? Like, you know, I treat him kindly and with compassion on the outside, right? But I'm working it. But what's so beautiful is as I work that, I realize, of course, this is an amplification of an internal realm. And I want to just get this point across because it's so subtle and it's so powerful. Even in our wellness practices, Ayurveda, yoga, meditation, if we're doing it from an orientation that what we are right now is fundamentally flawed and off. And it's very subtle, because I do not like fear. I do not like it. I hate the feeling and I want to be rid of it. And I don't like feeling super angry. I do not like it, Eden. And it's funny because like I come across as like a big old fat fireball, and I'm inside, I'm like not identified with that at all. I'm like,
Mm,
dude, no, I'm this like watery, sweet little puppy dog.
mm.
And the more I have been like, okay, I am afraid and I'm not going to try to get rid of it. Okay, I am angry and I'm not going to make it bad. The more I get out of warfare with myself. And then in this mystical way, outer reality doesn't need to project war back at me. I think a lot of, and I'm in this too. I mean, it's fun to look at the news, right? It can be fun to like see what's going on in the
Oh yeah.
media world. But the less I'm like less and less and less interested in it, truthfully, as the warfare inside of me starts to go down, that need to look at it externally is lessened because I don't need a place to project the war out of me.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I always refer to this as like going to get my hit of trigger from that one social media page that you just know. It's like, I know I don't agree with this person, and I'm just going to search their profile to go get that. Cause yeah, that's such a good way of looking at it. And it makes me think about just pulling. I don't know if you see it this way. It's making me think we have these multiple selves. Sometimes I feel like I have multiple selves, but then I'm like bringing them into this fold and just even being able to converse between them more smoothly. And I think I'm just getting parallels here to just being able to regulate the nervous system, being able to churn those emotions through with just like a little more grace every time.
Mm, 100%. That's it.
It's a lifelong practice. It's so simple, but it's every single day. Like it's just,
It's freaking Groundhog Day.
yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. Ugh. Okay. So you have something called Shakti School, and everything we've been talking about are things that we talk about in Shakti School. I went through Shakti School. It's an Ayurveda school, but it's so much more. Can you tell us more about it?
Sure. You said it really well. I mean, it's Lady Life School is what I call it. And it's myself. I'm kind of the main gal there, but we have lots of teachers beyond myself. We have about 20, we're up to about 20 teachers now, many of them quite well-known luminaries in the field of Ayurveda and sensuality, conscious sexuality. We have a really popular teacher named Chris Muse that teaches stuff that like I thought I was pretty awake to this, and I was like, wow, I know absolutely nothing about my sexual impulse like physically. And so it really is like a re-education on a lot of the things that a lot of women really intuitively know is super important. And we learn the basics of Ayurveda, as you know, from doing it, which is super important. And lots of people come because they want to teach other people this stuff. But bigger than that, it is a soul project that we are involved in. It's a year long that can lead into a 2-year program where we just give a lot of tools and parameters and support for women to show up for 3 hours once a week and feel the part of them that, like, to your point of being wonderfully schizophrenic, which we all are, of having multiple voices, right? Which is an honest assessment. You know, one of my teachers, Mohan, would say, you're just not saying out loud, right? But whatever
Literally.
schizophrenic, I mean, schizophrenia is a real disease that you don't have. But my point is, we really just give room for all those parts. And I think, not to like talk too much about how cute my own baby is, but I think what makes it really different and what I'm really proud of and why I do keep doing it is I trust I trust what happens when you just give people room, women or men, room to get quiet and in touch with their ups and downs, lefts and rights, demons and angels. Like when you help people and hold that containership of that, I just am amazed at the imagery that's so healing. Like I was teaching in Cincinnati a few weeks ago, and one of the women, I mean, many of these women had never done anything like this. It was the first time they were introduced to this type of material in their life, right? And I taught them some energy work 101 and invited them to see an image. And all these images came, and I'm like scholarly pursuit in the Jungian psychology right now. And I'm like, he was right. These women in Kentucky who have never done this before are exhibiting these primal archetypal images of divine healing through their bodies in real time. That to me is what Shakti School is. It's a place where we just get to tune into like our birthright, which is you are the guru. You are it. It is also all around you and holding you, and has been holding you for time immemorial. And it wants us, right? Like, and I'm saying it as if it's separate, but it's not. And so enabling this force to penetrate the egoic personality, to penetrate the body, is really what we're working with there. And, learning like hot tips and tricks for like an Ayurvedic winter, and like all the practical stuff that's also really important.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's so important. Whenever I try and explain to someone what Shakti School is, it's a 5-hour long thing. But something I love that your school is about is like, it really takes it on all the levels. Like, yes, it's about getting to digestion, drinking your lemon water, but it's like you take the spiritual principle behind that and just take it through all the levels down to like the most subtle practices. So it really is just like whole self, spiritual, oiled up goddess, great digestion, manifestation, spiritual surrender school.
Like, flip me over, I'm done, because sometimes it's like my digestion still sucks, and like there's room for that. There's like the big emphasis I try to give is like, look, I'm not promising anything. You may or may not have perfect digestion at the end of this course, but what I can assure you is you're going to have a lot more chance if we know what our beautiful Indian foremothers and forefathers have held for us orphans. Many of us who have lost our spiritual traditions of our grandmothers. This is why, one of the reasons why we can go to India, and I take that very seriously. We go there because it's been held for 5,000 years with some interruption through British colonialism that one could argue did affect Ayurveda even to this day, maybe deleteriously. I don't know, maybe not. But wow, 5,000 years is a long time to like keep something so intricate and diverse alive. I'm from, as you are, like probably judging by how you look, which is a terrible way of judging people. But like, we're from traditions, Eden, and a lot of women don't know this, like where our grandmother wisdom was literally systematically removed from culture. It is one of the biggest traumas that we have. So we're working to lovingly honor India, while at the same time giving all women from all walks of life, because we are entering into a global era. Like, it's just happened and happening, where these conversations of cultural differentiation are important to have to honor people, but at the same time will be completely obsolete very soon. We are really a melting pot at Ayurveda School of women's wisdom traditions. And I just feel really obviously passionate about it because of the incredible women that go through the school and come out of it like yourself. And, look at you. I mean, you're just so clearly such a vehicle, as we all are, right, for something great. And I just want to encourage you and everyone out there to really find what lights you up and just keep plugging at it, and it'll come to fruition.
100%. And your digestion will get better at some point.
Unless you keep eating.
Yeah.
Pizza.
It's so funny though. I was just thinking like my digestion's gotten so much better since I've gone through Ayurveda school. Yes, because I scrape my tongue and I eat beans and spices, but also because the emotional, like just the spiritual and emotional channel, like that's equally as important. So yeah, shameless plug. Go check it out. I think we have a code too for people. You start in January.
Yeah, we'll give you guys a code special for Eden's listeners. We'll put it in the show notes. It starts January 18th. And also, we have an amazing team of, we call them our call girls. We're happy to call them that. And so I have a bunch of gals that have already gone through the whole program from diverse backgrounds. I encourage you, if you want to talk to a real human woman, you can, and we'll put the link for that as well. Like if you want to talk to somebody that's done the program, and then can kind of tell you all about it. We have gals that can really support you in that. And yeah, we start January 18th, and I mean, we're definitely doing it, but I don't know. I don't know how long, like, I'm just like, all right, here we go again. You know, I definitely,
Yeah.
I do want to say, if you want to do it live, get in now. Cause it's every year I'm sort of like, is this the last one? I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. And now's the time. Now's the time. Well, thank you for coming. And I hope to have you back soon at some point.
Thank you, Eden. I just wish you all the best. And yeah, you're a great interviewer. I've done a lot of podcasts, and this is probably my favorite. I mean that. Yeah, you're really
What?
good. You're a really good interviewer. I mean, not to just like gush on you at the end of your own podcast, but yeah, you're real damn smart, and it's fun to talk to smart people who can like weave things together. Interviewing isn't easy. You make it look easy, so good job.
Well, thank you. I'll receive that.
Take it in.
A big special thanks to Kevin Carlisle of Goodbye Gemini, who wrote this beautiful podcast music, and to DJ Juan Pablo Jimenez in southern Spain for mixing it and making it magic.